I think we'll start out with Mr. Anderson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Josh Anderson, Legislative Service Office. Um, for this topic, a review of our past legislation and recent legislation related to property tax. Mr. Quilty here has a document he's going to go through with some of the recent bills that passed and some of their impacts. And then Mr. Giel from the Department of Revenue will be up later to talk some of those numbers. But first, I thought it might be useful to just talk about the recent efforts of this committee related to property tax, some of which passed and some of which did not. I just kind of recognize that this has been an ongoing discussion here the last few interims. I passed out a short, just one pager here during the break with this information. But our recent discussions really started in the 2021 interim. Of course, you know, this being the Revenue Committee, property tax issues pop up throughout the time. And prior to that, we had some discussions specific to the government property exemption, which is going to also be on our agenda, I think, maybe later this interim. But really, this discussion primarily focused around residential property taxes. Really started in the 2021 interim, where it was an interim topic for the committee. The committee discussed a number of issues, but the primary focus at that time seemed to be on the appeal process. It was kind of came out of some of the tax issues they were experiencing, primarily in Natrona County. Committee discussed a bill on revising that appeal process somewhat, but ultimately did not sponsor that bill. The committee did sponsor a bill to provide for the county optional tax refund program as an add-on to the existing tax refund program, and that bill did pass the legislature. The discussions then continued in the 2022 interim, where property tax was the #1 priority of the committee. Sponsored a number of bills related to property tax. There was a property tax homeowners exemption that year that would have provided an exemption up to $50,000 of fair market value, not to exceed 25%. That ultimately failed in the legislature. 2023 House Bill 99 was an update to the property tax refund program, expanded qualifications for that up to 125% of median income, and increase the maximum refund amount and the maximum amount of assets to qualify. And that bill did pass. And then there was House Joint Resolution 1 that would have added residential property as a property class. That bill ultimately did not pass, but a very similar bill, 2023's Senate Joint Resolution 3 did pass, also known as Amendment A, and that was ultimately approved by the voters. In the 2023 interim, again, property tax was a main focus of the committee. Sponsored a number of bills. House Bill 3 was property tax exemption for long-term homeowners, which is 50% if the owner is 65 and resides in Wyoming for 25 years or more. That did pass, and that bill does sunset in July of 2027. 2024 House Bill 4, property tax refund program. As it passed the legislature, it would have increased that maximum income again up from 125 up to a partial refund at 165% of the median income. That portion was line item vetoed by the governor, but there was an extension for people with a maximum income of 145% of the median income. House Bill 18, property tax inflation cap, would have established a cap of 5% over the prior year. That did not pass. that year, but that year, a similar bill passed, House Bill 45, which provides an exemption of any increase over 4%. House Joint Resolution 1, this would have amended that House Joint Resolution 3 to add some additional classes of property and to allow property to be valued at less than full value by establishing a cap. That bill ultimately did not pass the legislature, and then Senate File 54 was a homeowner tax exemption of 25% of the first $2 million. That passed the legislature but was vetoed by the governor. And then finally, last year, again, property tax was essentially the almost the sole focus of the committee. And the committee did sponsor a number of bills. House Bill 39, that was a cleanup of the property tax refund program, just to remove the references to that 165%. That bill was passed by the legislature. The business property exemption was extended the exemption for business property up to first $75,000 in each county, and that was passed by the legislature. Senate File 49, tangible personal property index and depreciation, which establishes rules for the valuation of tangible personal property, and that was enacted by the legislature. Senate File 67, the long-term homeowner exemption revisions. It would have revised that long-term homeowner exemption qualifications somewhat, and then would have repealed the effective date. But that bill ultimately did not pass. And then finally, Senate File 69, the homeowner property exemption, which is an exemption of 25% of the fair market value for the first $1 million. And then beginning in 26, that exemption will only apply to property where the person claiming the exemption resides for 8 months of the year. And so that's kind of our recent efforts of this committee. Take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. My question comes about the People's Ballot Initiative that is due to come before us at the next election. Is House Bill 69 in the legal aspect considered substantially similar, or should this committee be concerned that could potentially be pulled?
Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent question, Representative Lean. I don't know if I have the answer to that. It's not certainly not me that makes that determination. I think an issue that could be looked into that by this committee.
Go Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just if you would, so in 2021 in the ad interim, it sounds like there was a significant amount of discussion and there was actually a draft bill. If you wouldn't mind digging up that draft bill, maybe and shooting it our way, that would be a big help. I would like to see what, obviously, much of what we'll discuss probably in the next day or two is probably discussed previously. So that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure thing, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I will send that to the committee.
Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, just a little follow-up on Representative Lean's question on 69 versus the People's Initiative and whether they're substantially the same and who rules on that. You said you don't comment on that. How would that eventually work its way through being contested if that was to be contested? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, again, good question, and I'm not sure I'm fully up on that process. I can dig into that process and who makes that determination. I believe maybe the Attorney General's office, but I have to double check that, and I can certainly send that to the committee.
Mr. Anderson, at the end of last session, we talked to the Attorney General's office about 69 versus the People's Initiative. And at that point in time, they believed that they were different enough that one wouldn't cancel the other out. Hopefully that's still true.
I haven't heard any different, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along the lines of the People's Ballot Initiative, if that was to pass, we do have a sunset clause in 69 for land and structure, but it is my understanding that the People's Ballot Initiative is only for structure. If that was to be the case, are we trading 50% value for 50% of the structure versus 25% of the land and structure? Is that the proper understanding?
I'd have to dig in. It's been a long time since that, Mr. Chairman, excuse me. It's been a long time since I looked at the People's Initiative. It certainly could be the case. Also, you know, the legislature will still have the ability to react and enact legislation implementing that People's Initiative, and can certainly address any changes at that time.
Are you up next, Mr. Quilty? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one more quick question, Mr. Anderson, on SF 69, back to that. And I hate to beat a dead horse here, but we've talked about it in the past in committee and on the floor, but the 8-month requirement, I just have a hard time with that. And I think everybody's going to have a hard time with that. I mean, it's, how do you police it? I mean, I just don't understand how we can even have that language in 69. Number one, just there's no way to police that. And what if you were, 7 months and 29 days? Do you go in and say, hey, I got stuck in a snowstorm and I couldn't make the requirement? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, yeah, that certainly a policy decision there. I know the Department of Revenue has been thinking about how they can allow people to apply and certify that they have resided in that property for the 8 months that would be required. But I believe it'll need to be an application process essentially through the department where someone would certify that they meet that requirement. Is how I understand it would currently be implemented.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just comment that that is no different than the refund program that we currently have that requires an affidavit to sign attesting to the facts as required to be eligible for the program. And I think Mr. Gill will tell us tomorrow, or if not sooner, about how the department is standing up a statewide process for making that possible. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, I understand 69, there's no application process outlined in that bill, is there?
So, Mr. Chairman, so for this year, because it applies to any homeowner, then there's no application process. With that addition of that 8-month requirement, I think the only way, and I don't want to speak for the department, but the only way that they could think of to administer that would be to require people to apply and verify that they live there for that 8-month period.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, looking at the 25% off property tax bill, is that 8 months in their home, or is it 8 months that they've been paying property taxes in the state of Wyoming? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the way that's written is that it's where they have to actually reside there for 8 months. And Mr. Chairman, if there's no further question, I turn it over to Mr. Quilty to talk about some of these bills and how they were enacted.
Mr. Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dalton Quilty,
Good
LSO,
afternoon.
Budget Fiscal.
How was lunch?
It was excellent. Yes, your recommendation came through.
Good.
So I will be covering the memorandum about recent tax legislation summary, 2023 general through 2025 general session. Now, the Revenue Committee stated during the 2025 interim, the number one priority of the committee is property taxes and potential revisions and reforms to the current property tax system. To assist in this process, LSO has created this memorandum. I'll be walking through to providing background and summary of property tax reductions, property tax exemptions, and legislation regarding the classification and application of these policies and qualifying properties. So the first one we will be discussing is the property tax residential property class, 2023 Senate Joint Resolution 3. It was adopted as a resolution by the legislature in 2023 and adopted as a constitutional amendment in November of 2024. Before amending, Article 15, Section 11 of Wyoming's Constitution required all property to be uniformly valued in three classes. The first, the gross production of minerals and mine products. The second, industrial property. And the third, all other real and personal property. This third class of all other property included residential, commercial, agricultural, and personal property. The constitutional amendment created a fourth class separating residential property from the third class, as well as allowing for the creation of a subclass for owner-occupied dwellings. It allows the legislature to prescribe a separate and unique assessment rate specifically for residential property and owner-occupied dwellings without impacting other classes' assessment rates. The next bill, Property Tax Exemption for Long-Term Homeowners, 2024 Session Laws, Chapter 106. It created a 50% of assessed value exemption on property applicable for those over 65 who owned a home and paid taxes for at least 25 years in Wyoming. Now, that does not have to be at the same address, and it does not have to be sequentially as long as they do reach that 25 years total. If they have a spouse that qualifies, they would also qualify as well. The exemption applies to the primary residence defined in the bill as residential real property where the person applying has lived at least 8 months of the year. The bill includes a July 1st, 2020 sunset date, after which users will enroll for relief under the homeowner's property tax exemption. The DOR will provide estimates for the total amount exempted by the long-term homeowners. The next bill, Property Tax Refund Program, 2024 Session Laws, Chapter 109. It expanded on existing property tax refund programs. Originally, the program did not allow a person to qualify for the refund if their income was 125% or more of the median gross household income for the applicant's county of residence or the state. This bill added two additional thresholds at 145% and 165% of median gross household income, with the 145% threshold qualifying for 65% of the refund and the 165% threshold qualifying for 25% of the refund. Now, the 165% threshold was line item vetoed by the governor, meaning that the maximum qualifying median gross income under current law is 145%. Now, looking at that 145%, out of the 23 counties, all but 10 use the statewide average of $109,881. A couple of the larger counties, Teton has a higher income limit at $192,459. Sublets is $116,841, and Lincoln County's has $129,529. Homeowners can apply for a refund of up to 1/2 of their median residential property tax amount or 75% of their property tax bill, whichever one is less. From fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2025, the program issued 4,672 more refunds with an average refund of $120.48 and a total amount of increase of $6,005,540 from fiscal year 24 to 25. The total amount refunded in fiscal year 25 was $14,269,323.88, which means the total amount increased about 42% from 24 to 25. The next bill we'll be discussing is Property Tax Exemption, Residential Structures and Land, 2024 Session Laws, Chapter 107. This is popularly referred to as the 4% exemption. It created a property tax exemption that is equal to any increase to property value over 4% above the value of the property in the prior year. Now, it originally applied in 2024, and it also defined a single-family residential structure and improved land associated with the structure. Now, with this bill, fiscal impacts are difficult to predict just because individual communities will grow at different rates. Appendix 1, which is attached to the memorandum, details the total amount of assessed value exempted in tax year 2024. Now, numbers to note from this are the total amount exempted, which was 300.7 million. Of that amount, 44.6% is attributable to Teton County, $149.9 million exemption. And the impact to property taxes based on this assessed value exemption will be statewide 18.98 million, and for Teton County individually, $8.463 million.
I have a quick question for you.
Yes, sir.
Did any of the counties not raise 4%? Did we have, for example, did we have a county whose property values didn't go up 4% or less last year? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Off of the top of my head, I don't know exactly what county, but I do know there was one county that did not reach that 4%. I will be walking through a brief hypothetical, and I believe the hypothetical takes place in, Fremont County, which had a 4.82% average growth. Now, the next bill is the Veterans. Oh, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just looking at Appendix A, so I'm just making sure I'm clear. So the assessed value that was exempted was that 300 million, right? The actual tax value, the approximate tax dollars exempted was 18.9 million. Is that right? I'm sorry, I didn't catch all those numbers as you were spewing them out, but I'm looking at the table. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So the actual amount of dollars difference is that 18.9 million, right?
Through the chairman, Representative Locke. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Now, the Veterans Ad Valorem exemption, the 2024 session laws, chapter 101, it increases the annual ad valorem tax exemption from $3,000 to $6,000 of assessed value for veterans. It may be used by surviving spouses until they remarry. It also provided an appropriation of $8.2 million from the general fund to reimburse counties for the exemption. Veterans are eligible if they have lived in the state for 3 years and are honorably discharged veterans of World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, or honorably discharged veterans that were awarded the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal or any other authorized service or campaign medals indicating service for the United States in an armed foreign conflict. It may be applied to property taxes or vehicle registration. And the expected fiscal impacts from the increase in expenditure to reimburse those counties is $4.1 million in both fiscal year 25 and 2026. The next bill, Property Tax Exemptions Order of Applications, 2025 Session Laws, Chapter 147. Now, personally, I think this is one of the most important bills we'll be discussing. This bill specifies the order of application for the exemptions when an applicant qualifies for more than one. Now, the Department of Revenue will determine the precise order for exemptions to be levied. However, in this bill, the legislature outlined several guidelines that must be followed. Exemptions will be applied in sequence, with subsequent exemptions applying to the newly modified assessed values. Exemptions based on a percentage of property value will be applied first in order of smallest to largest percentage, again, in sequence applied to modified assessed values. Exemptions not based on a percentage of property value will be applied after any exemptions based on.
We have a question. Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So sorry, and I might have lost the bubble on the memo. Kind of where are you at in the memo? Because I was listening to was the veterans. And then, sorry,
Yep,
order of
property-
application. It was the next paragraph and I somehow scrolled out of control there, but, okay, so that was basically what House Bill 279 or whatever. So that's where you're hitting the order. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we should be on the top of page 3.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Follow up?
Excellent. As I was saying, the Exemptions not based on a percentage of property value will be applied after any exemption based on a percentage of the property value. This bill separately also appropriated $10.5 million from the general fund to the DOR for assisting with the property tax refund program. We do have a brief hypothetical at the end of this memorandum kind of discussing a make-believe person that qualifies for a lot of these different exemptions and how they interact with each other and kind of how we would go through that. The next bill, Business Property Tax Exemption, 2025 Session Laws, Chapter 28. It amends the existing business property tax exemption. The old was a $2,400 of fair market value in one county total. The new one provides an exemption on up to $75,000 in business assets in each county. The maximum deduction using the average mill levies is about $500 off the tax bill, and most small businesses would not be able to claim the full amount, i.e. they only have laptops, printers, chargers, small stuff. Large companies with multiple facilities or multiple sites in different counties would be able to claim this exemption multiple times for each county that they are in. They can claim it once. Tangible Personal Property Index and Depreciation, 2025 Session Laws, Chapter 20. This bill revises the method of determining personal property value for administering property taxes on a property. It specifies that the fair market value of personal property will be determined by using valuation indexes and depreciation schedules recommended by the DOR based on their rules and regulations. Once the property is depreciated to the depreciation floor defined in the bill as 20% of the reported installed cost of property, this bill specifies that the trending factor shall remain constant for all following years until property is removed from service. The trending factor is the combination of the valuation indices and depreciation schedules. Essentially, tractors or shelving will always be taxed, and it can't reach 0% on that tax limit. But if I spent $1,000 on a shelf, it'd go down to that 20% minimum, and I'd still be paying taxes on about $200.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hear you say that that tax number could never be zero on something. Is it because we're using a value in use, or is there something more to it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean. So the depreciation floor is 20%, so we'll never go below that 20% floor. So in the shelving example, if I bought it for $1,000, I'd always be taxed on at least $200 because 20% of that $1,000 would be $200. Did that answer? Okay. Wonderful. The homeowner property tax exemption, 2025 Session Laws, Chapter 106. This is also referred to as the 2025 Senate File 69. It provides an exemption of 25% of the fair market value of residential property of the first $1 million of fair market value of a single family residential structure and the associated improved land. The bill contains no backfill or appropriations for the reduction in revenues. Beginning fiscal year 2026 and continuing thereafter, it applies to all residential structures in fiscal year 26 before being lowered to apply to only owner-occupied dwellings in fiscal year 2027. In fiscal year 2028, the long-term homeowners exemption will reach its sunset date and participants will most likely enroll in this program. This trend is displayed in the estimated fiscal impacts, seeing the largest impact in fiscal year 2026 before seeing a decrease in fiscal year 27 caused by the change to only owner-occupied dwellings qualifying before again increasing with the influx of people caused by the sunset of the long-term homeowners exemption. Appendix 2 also attached is an LSO fact sheet originally provided in the post-session materials packet. It details Senate File 69 as well as its expected fiscal impacts over tax years as opposed to the fiscal years used in the memorandum. The next bill, tax exemption property owned by the state, 2025 Session Laws, Chapter 26. Existing law specifies that property of the state of Wyoming owned and used primarily for a governmental purpose is exempt from property taxation. This bill clarifies what governmental purpose is and that it includes the lease of state school lands and state lands for agricultural purposes. The bill provides property tax exemptions for all lands owned by the state of Wyoming. The exemption has a sunset date of January 1st, 2027. This bill clarifies that other state property, including improvements to land that are not owned and used primarily for a governmental purpose, may be taxed. Revised property tax exemptions for property of the state applies to the tax year beginning January 1st, 2025. And as previously mentioned, now we're going to get into the hypothetical scenario, trying to see how some of these interact. It helps to fully understand the variety of exemptions, how each is taken, and how they may be applied. So we're going to be discussing John Doe. Now, Mr. John Doe is a 70-year-old full-time Wyomingite. He has owned his home for 35 plus years. He's a small business owner, a veteran, and he lives in Fremont County. Now, in Fremont County, the property tax increased to 4.82%. So his home increased in value from $350,000 to $366,880. Now, applying Chapter 106 Property Tax Exemption Order of Operations, any increase to the assessed value of over 4% is exempted. Mr. Doe's home was originally assessed in 2023 at $33,250, but has since increased to $34,854. This increase was greater than that 4%, and therefore Mr. Doe will be exempted from $273.60 of the assessed value. This amount is subtracted from his original assessed value, making his new assessed home value $34,580. Next, Mr. Doe measures whether or not he'd take the long-term homeowner or the homeowner tax exemption. Now, the long-term homeowner tax exemption is more beneficial for him, so he'd take that, even though he qualifies for the homeowner tax exemption. Now, because the long-term homeowner is a 50% deduction, he takes that $34,580 assessed value and he drops down to $17,290 of assessed value. Now, post long-term homeowners, he's also a veteran, so we take off the $6,000 of assessed value for the veterans discount, or leaving his final number that he'll be taxed on as $11,290 of assessed value. So under this new suite of legislation that I just discussed, he'd owe $848 in taxes. If we had not changed anything over the past couple legislative sessions, he would have owed $2,392. So the recent legislation saved him $1,544, and that doesn't even include the business tax savings from the personal property tax exemption increasing from $24,000 to $75,000 for business. Now, these savings to the taxpayer will result in a reduction to revenue when compared to the old system. We'd see a decrease of $247 to counties from their 12 mills, a decrease of $884 to schools from their 43 mills, and a decrease of $413 to special districts from the remaining 20.108 mills that are levied in Fremont County. Now, this is an atypical hypothetical situation. Many Wyomingites will not apply or qualify for this many of the exemptions, but it is a good way to kind of see how those exemptions interact and how they build off of one another. And that concludes my discussion on the memorandum. I stand for any questions.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the 4% cap, I see in here that you have the year of 2024. Is there additional years for which the land and structure dates began to escalate?
So, Mr. Chairman and Representative Lean, I just want to make sure I'm getting this question correctly. Are you asking about the variability of the increases in?
Mr. Chairman, I'm asking about when the dates were locked in, through what assessed value did we start at for the 4% cap to then begin its escalation point?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the year is 2024 that they were locked in. And so now it's increases. And then the next year, so for 2026, they'll base it on 2025's values. So it's looking at the previous year to see if there's a 4% increase.
And Mr. Chairman, just to follow on that. So it does take into account the exemption from the previous year. So it's the exemption compound. So it can't go more than 4% over the discounted rate of the previous year. So if the 4% lowered the rate, last year, then the next year it can go 4% over that lowered rate or lowered amount.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for clarification, in 2024, it was against structure only. Right? And in 2025, it's against structure and land, associated land. Now, that does not include the other improvement, the outbuilding improvements, but it includes at least the residential structure and land, I believe. So theoretically, assuming I'm viewing this right, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong. So on the structure, this would, what people see in 2025 would be the second application of that 4%, but it would be the first application of the 4% against the land, I believe. And so if I'm wrong on any of that, please let me know, but that's the way I think I see this.
I believe that's true, Mr. Chairman.
So wrapping my brain around this, let's say my house is worth or was worth 100,000 and it got valued at 120. My available, what I'd be taxed on would be 104,000, correct? And then the next year could only be 4% above the 104,000, not as we've all seen the new assessments that have come out this year. And so do I have that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just looking at the long-term homeowner. And I have a number. I know the department was gracious in giving me an estimate back in March, and I want to say, sorry, I was trying to find the spreadsheet, which I've only got a few too many of them open right at this moment. So we'll see if we can get there. But I think the estimate at the time was in the ballpark of about 24,000. What I see in the memo is as of the more recent number, it looks like we're roughly at that, about 28,000 requests for that. Is that pretty accurate? So it's a little higher than that? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. I appreciate that. And when is that ends? That ended, didn't it? Didn't they? When is the last day they can request that?
I believe the last day for the, sorry, Mr. Chairman,
Long term.
long-term homeowners, when they can apply for it.
Yes.
Yes, I believe it has already passed. It was the fourth Monday
In May.
May,
right?
yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just trying to remember all these dates.
So it was
A little
about a week ago.
hard to remember all the connections. So I guess what you're telling me though is that maybe we're still waiting to see if that number is a little higher than that. I see 28,800-ish. It's probably somewhere in that 29,000 range ballpark.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman. The DOR will have more specifics on that, but I believe they are still waiting on some of the stragglers in terms of exemptions, but it should be around that number.
And
Follow up?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then just in terms of calculating this, I know, and my data is off a little bit, and I know this is an impossible to predict exactly until you actually know exactly which houses have been requested. But I know it was my understanding about a year ago that the average house, or at least within the last year, the average home value was roughly about 380, 390, I think. And so has that changed significantly? Is that data that you have that you know? I'm just curious from the perspective that I'd like to apply these numbers so we can definitely take a look at what do we estimate the impacts to be. I'd like to be able to pull those bits and pieces together. Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I can go ahead and pull together those numbers and make sure that we have the most updated figures for you and send that out kind of in that whole email we're going to be sending at the follow-up of this meeting.
Sorry. My bad.
Yes, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other thing. And so the way I have attempted to run these numbers, and I know this is not an exact or perfect approach, but conceptually what I've done is just since all I had was 2024 data, right? And 2025 data is really just formulating. So to do rough estimates, what I attempted to do is take the 25% assessment against the all of the counties. You take out the residential from all of the other stuff and you calculate based on that. And then what I did, so I calculated that against the entire tax base that I could see in 2024. Then in terms of the long-term homeowner, they're taking the additional piece. So that adds on for those particular users, for lack of a better term. The way I visualize that would add on an additional 25%, if that makes sense. Does it make sense how I'm walking through the calculation? So although it's a 50%, they didn't get the 25%. So in the calculation, the way I cheated it is I did an assessment against the entire the tax base, and then I added on 25% for the long-term homeowner. In terms of a rough order of magnitude estimate, is that relatively accurate?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, in terms of an estimate, yes, that should get you into the ballpark. Again, because of the way the exemptions work and the fact that there is a maximum value of exempted property. So say in Teton, where a lot of those houses may be more than $1 million, they only get to take that up to that first $1 million of fair market value. Whereas a lot of the totals that are being reported, it could have a $10 million house in there, but they'd only get to take a tenth of that because they'd only be able to take up to $1 million.
Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So question for you guys. Did you guys bring documentation with more detailed breakouts of the numbers other than what you have in this memo? Or is this memo what we have right now to go against?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, in terms of numbers, the memo is going to have a bulk of them. I know the Department of Revenue brought some numbers as well, so they may be able to share some more detailed stuff. If you do have any specific numbers or figures that you as a committee would like to see in that kind of follow-up email we're sending, just let us know and we can get any of that put together that the department doesn't share.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Store.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Locke, we do have this, if this is helpful, on everybody's desk that identifies the amount of exemption to assessed values from each of the categories of exemptions that qualify for 2025. So that total is over $2.8 billion of assessed value. That translates generally to about $200 million of revenue loss, state and local. It also notes that Teton County represents about 27% of that total, with over half of what the exemption is from the 4% cap. And that's because we have high values and they do continue to go up. And so the cap is more meaningful as a result in Teton County. And as you can imagine, if you have a $10 million house, the 4% cap is worth more than it is on a $350,000 house. Does that math make sense to everybody? So we're seeing that there is a really huge impact to tax revenues from the 4% cap, especially coming out of Teton County. And what that ultimately translates to is not only losses for local counties, and it really impacts school revenues mostly, because about 2/3 of our property tax goes to school revenues, and Teton County sends a lot of dollars back to the state to the school foundation program. And I came up with around 35 to 36 million-ish, I think, of lost revenues to the school foundation program, I think just as a result of the 4%. So that might be for all of them. So anyway, you might just all take a look at that.
And Mr. Chairman, just sorry to follow up on that. That came from Mr. Gill at the Department of Revenue, and I'm sure he'll talk about those numbers when he gets up.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I just want to clarify, as I'm running through Senate File 69 from last year, it appears to me, make sure I've got this right, in the joint conference committees that happened prior to its passage, we removed the protection, or we removed the sunset date if the ballot initiative was to pass. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, I'd have to double check that, but I believe that's true. I don't believe there's a sunset in that anymore.
Mr. Anderson, I think I can answer that. The sunset, or only language for a sunset in that bill, is if the People's Initiative passes, then that would get sunset. If not, it doesn't have a sunset date. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move on to public testimony. Oh, the department, yeah.
Thank you,
Welcome
Mr.
to
Chairman.
Revenue, Mr. Gill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having us here in Gillette, the energy capital of the world. So great to be here. Ken Gill, Property Tax Administrator for the Department of Revenue. Some great questions, great presentation by the LSO. Really always appreciate the thorough research that they do. I thought I'd start, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, at the property tax refund program and where we sit today, if that would be okay. So the property tax refund application deadline was yesterday, the first Monday in June by statute. And as of yesterday morning, and so these are, I'm sure these have changed since yesterday morning, but as of yesterday morning, we had 10,636 applications. We had 7,470 in the actual system. We've already sent out 5,015 refunds, and the total refunded so far is $5,103,534.81. So that was as of yesterday morning. Of course, with the deadline being yesterday, our great county treasurers were helping take these applications in their local markets, and then they'll be sending them to us all at one time. So I'm sure the mailbox was very full today, as they got to the office. So that's where we stand with the property tax refund, Mr. Chairman, at this point in time. We have until September 31st to get those checks out to the applicants. So we'll be working daily on those until they're all out. So if there's any questions on the refund program, I would sure take those. I'm not an expert on it by any means, but.
Sounds like we're in pretty good shape with it as far as timeline. Am I hearing you correctly?
Mr. Chairman, yes. If you recall last year, we had to wait for the appropriation to start sending those checks. So we couldn't start sending checks till June 1, or no, excuse me, July 1. So we had to wait for the appropriation last year. So we had about a 3-month lull there where we couldn't issue those checks, whereas folks were applying in April this year, and a week later they were receiving a check. So it was nice that we didn't have to wait for that appropriation this year.
Thank you. Co-chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm sorry, I'm not typing fast enough and shifting gears. So you said approximately 10,000 requests. What was the kind of the ultimate estimated impact, dollar impact?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Right now, we've issued 5.1 million in checks.
Okay.
Appropriation, I believe, in House Bill 279 for this program was another 10,500,000. We can pretty much count that every 1,000 applicants, this is the math that's working out, every 1,000 applicants equals about $1 million in refund. And last year, we refunded just under 15,000 total. 15,000 applications.
Thank you.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what you're saying is with a current approximately 10,000, you probably gave an exact number.
I did,
What-
yeah, sorry,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman. It was 10,636 applications so far.
So far,
And
but that was as of, I mean, they had a day.
yeah, that was yesterday morning and
So are
and-
we actually seeing less applications? Then, because you said I thought you said we had 15,000 before. So,
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we're seeing less. That was actually that they've typed into our list. You know, there's boxes of envelopes that have not been opened yet.
gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's continue.
All right, Mr. Chairman. Go on to the long-term homeowners applications that were taken by the county assessors statewide. Of course, after that bill passed in the 2024 session, the department promulgated rules for that and then created the application per the law. Those applications got sent out to the county assessors in the fall of 2024, so around October-ish. We sent them out and they started collecting those. Those numbers are on a sheet that looks like this. It's just a little spreadsheet here, just a real small little graph that we passed out earlier this morning. And you can see at this time, and this was pulled on May 28th, so Friday, we had 31,705 applications for the long-term homeowners program. I will say we're probably about 200 to 250 off right now. Talking to just a few county assessors out there, they got inundated on the last few days and probably had 200, 300, 400 left to process and get into the system. So I would venture to say we'll probably be right around that 33,000 applications statewide.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Guile. Of those applications, do you guys have a handle on the average value of each one of those applications? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, great question. No, we don't at this time yet, but that will be something that I will bring to the August meeting. Absolutely will. Now, I do have some numbers for totals, but the average house or the average owner, I don't have that at this time yet, but we will bring that to the August meeting for you. Okay, Mr. Chairman, if we could move on, it's the sheet that Representative Storer was referring to earlier. It has 6 columns in it, stated residential exemptions, June 2nd. So I actually pulled these yesterday morning before we left town. Okay, Mr. Chairman, so this here shows all of the exemptions that the LSO just described. The 4% cap on the dwelling per county, 4% cap on the land per county, and you're right, Chairman Locke was correct in saying this was the first year that the cap was on the land, the 4%. Anything over 4% exempted on the land, this was the first year. So the house, the structure was first implemented in 2024 based on the 2023 value. So 2023 value was capped at 4% for 2024. Then that capped value was then again capped in 2025 for the 2025 tax year. And then next column over, you'll see the 25% homeowners exemption, also known as Senate File 69. And that includes the single family dwelling and the associated land. And then you'll see the assessed value of the 50% long-term homeowners that was exempted per county. And then totals at the end. So those are all assessed values. Statewide average mill levy of last year is 68.504. So you could take any of those totals times 0.068504. That would give you an estimate of tax dollars. If you go to our annual report, though, we actually have an average mill levy per county. So you could actually look at your county and see what the average mill levy was. So that's just using a statewide mill levy.
Mr. Gill?
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding we only have 2 counties that aren't charging the full 12 mills right now, or is it 3?
Mr. Chairman, good question. There's 2 county government that are under the 12 mills, and that would be Campbell County and Teton County.
Thank you, Mr. Gill.
If we could move on, Mr. Chairman, if you're okay with that.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just really quickly on this, so we would have to throw this into a spreadsheet. Have you done the calculation to see what these particular exemptions stack up in terms of actual tax impacts? I'm just trying to line it up with what I see in previous year numbers, overall property tax amounts and that kind of thing. Kind of can't do it until we've done that. Have you done that yet, or do we just need to do that?
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman, I have not done that yet. I
Okay.
just pulled these numbers yesterday, but I'm happy to get that done for you.
No sweat.
And
Thank you.
I can take the average mill levy per county to do that. And that's not hard. Be very
Thank you.
easy. Mr. Chairman, this next handout that we gave you is the big booklet here. It's multiple pages. I don't know, it's double-sided, probably about 18, 19 pages long. I thought the committee would be very interested, Mr. Chairman, in this report. What this report is the amount exempted, assessed value exempted per taxing authority. So what is a taxing authority? A city, a county, a fire district, a cemetery district, et cetera. Those are taxing authorities. So this is per taxing authority. Now, knowing that some counties, the only ones on this list, I should say, are the ones that levied in 2024. So for instance, for example, in Natrona County, the last election, the voters voted to tax themselves for a senior citizen service district in that county. So they voted for that. They didn't levy in 2024. They won't levy until 2025. So you will not see that senior citizen district in these numbers because I don't have a levy for them, obviously. But in the first column, you'll see the actual value exempted. You'll see the assessed value, the levy of that actual authority, the tax amount of that actual authority, and where it went and the exemption that it came from. HO being the homeowner's exemption or Senate File 69, LTHO being the long-term homeowner's exemption, res land being the 4% cap on the residential associated land, and residential being the 4% cap on the residential dwelling. So, and you can look down through your county and through your authorities, but I think does this show the whole picture? I don't think it does, Mr. Chairman. This is what was exempted. Okay, so we don't know what was gained or lost in other places, right? So like a city, for instance, a city may have annexed a large area that had very expensive properties in it. So maybe they gained in that area. But this is the amount exempted. So does this give you an overall picture? No. We also have to look then at what they gained or lost, depending on other factors like, a large business closed or a new subdivision was built or something like that. So this is never apples to apples. This is just what was exempted per authority. So very important I stress that.
And Mr. Gill, I want to thank you for putting this together for me. It doesn't give us a full picture, but it gives us a pretty good snapshot of what's going on.
Mr. Chairman, I think
And
it does. It also helps those taxing authorities. Those authorities as they're working on their budgets right now, your fire district's working on their budgets. And you'll see some of these, the amount exempted is very small. And then you'll see some where it's very, very large. So, but as I said, it doesn't tell the whole picture, but I thought it would be a very good query to write. And in all honesty, this is in the CAMA system now in all 23 counties. So you can go to your county assessor, you can it won't look quite like this. It's a little fancier than this, but it won't look exactly like this, but it will give you the same information. So every county assessor has the ability to run this per authority. They have the ability to run it per tax district, and they have the ability to run it per abstract code. And we'll talk about abstract codes tomorrow.
Sounds good. Thank you. Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Gillia. This is a great document. Is this something you could provide to us in an Excel spreadsheet so we could just be able to take a look at this data?
Oh,
I realize it may not be perfect, and if it's something we need at a later date, but is that something you can provide to us?
Mr. Chairman, excuse me. Yes, absolutely. I can provide that.
That's great.
I would ask Mr. Co-Chair that maybe we wait until the State Board of Equalization has actually certified the values, because currently all the information I'm giving you right now, these values have not been certified by the State Board of Equalization. So very important that we wait. The State Board will be having their abstract hearings from June 16th through June 27th. And very important that we kind of wait. Also in these numbers and the next page that we're going to look at, in these numbers, minerals have been certified. Okay, so we've certified the mineral values. Keep in mind, 2025 tax year is 2024 production. So it's always in the rears, right? So we've certified the mineral values statewide. We've certified the utility values statewide. We have not certified the railroads yet. The railroads in statute don't have to be certified until July, I believe it is. I don't remember the date in July, but they don't have to be certified until July. But speaking with my appraisal crew this morning, they were meeting with one of the companies today, one of the railroad companies, and hope to have those certifications out to the counties by the end of this week or early next week at least. So we're hoping to get the railroads. So we're getting through that certification process now. All of this is very preliminary and probably not worth the paper it's written on at this point, in all honesty, but it does give you at least a ballpark of where we're at. Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, we could move on to the next one.
Sounds good to me.
All right, sir. This sheet here, there's 2 pages, it's front and back, sorry. All right. So this page here, on the first, we'll look at the comparison and state and local assessed valuations for 25 and 24. Again, keeping in mind the 25 values are not certified yet at this time. So these numbers are definitely subject to change. You can see in the first 3 columns, that's the state assessed. So that's going to be your minerals. That's going to be your utility companies, railroads, telecoms, cable companies, etc. So what is valued at the state, what is appraised at the state. The next 3 you're going to see is what is locally assessed by your county assessor. And then the final 3 will be the totals of those. This is a table that comes directly from our annual report yearly. I just filled it in with the current 2025 numbers as of May 30th, 2025. So Um, I don't anticipate it'll change a ton, but it should be in the ballpark. If you'll notice at the very last column, it looks like we have two counties that were actually in the positive. And that being, I believe it was Johnson and Niobrara were in the positive this year. And why was that? It was state assessed. It was the state assessed valuations. So it was minerals and the utility companies, pipelines, et cetera, that made the difference in Johnson and in Niobrara. So those were the only two that were up. You can see there's a loss, total loss in state and local assessed of 4.1 billion assessed value. But you'll notice if you go to the first three columns, 2.6 billion of that was minerals. And if you go up about 5 or 6 columns or 5 or 6 rows, Sublette County was down $2 billion in mineral value from 2024 production. Oh, yes, in Converse County, excuse me. You're right, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. There were 3 that went positive, and Converse being one of them. And again, Mr. Chairman, Converse was due to state assessments.
Just for the audience, the assessed value isn't necessarily, well, it isn't money that's been lost. The state isn't out $4.1 billion. It's just the amount of property that wasn't taxed. So we're still around the 200 and some million, I believe. But we'll get to that. But I just wanted to point that out because it gets confusing sometimes. Thank you.
Absolutely, it does, Mr. Chairman, and you're right. That is assessed value. So you still have to take that times a mill levy. Absolutely. Flipping over the page there, I gave 2024 taxable value residential land improvements and personal property. Of course, we know the personal property in residential is typically mobile homes, titled mobile homes. And then I gave you numbers from May 30th that we pulled from the statewide CAMA system. And so this is just residential property. And you can see on average, every county is down about 22-23% statewide. Now you'll also notice, and Representative Storr will probably bring this up and already has, you'll notice that Teton was down 9%. And that makes sense because the 25% is up to the first 1 million. So they only got 23,250 assessed dollar discount.
So it's not as bad as we thought, huh? Sorry, just kidding. Did we not move mobile homes into residential structures for tax purposes? Or is that still, it's not personal property anymore, correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is a great question. It is still personal property as long as they're titled, that they have a title, just like your car. Your car has a title. Those mobile homes have a title. Now, in statute, there's a mechanism in statute that the owner can relinquish that title. And then in statute, it becomes real property. But if they ever want to move it again, that could be an issue. So typically they won't relinquish that title unless they, for mortgage purposes, a lot of times it will be for mortgage purposes that the lender requires it to be on a permanent foundation or on a basement or something like that. But mobile homes, if they're titled, are still personal property. So when we speak about Amendment A tomorrow, keep in mind mobile homes are personal property and they're in the all other class now. They're not in the residential class. So they are an all other. So should you change the residential class with Amendment A to the lowest at this point right now would be around 8.3 assessment level, the mobile homes would still be at 9.5 if you left the all others at 9.5.
it seems to me if I owned a mobile home, I'd want the tangible personal property deduction versus the 25% homeowner deduction. Am I thinking about that properly?
Mr. Chairman, good thought, but I believe Senate File 48 was for business tangible personal property. Mr. Chairman, that's all the handouts I have on the numbers that are current as of a couple days ago and some yesterday. And I'll answer any questions that I can.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious to know if you have any data on any obsolescence reports for us. I'm not looking for names. I'm just looking for numbers.
So interesting, Mr. Chairman, excuse me. Interesting question, Representative Lean. Obsolescence. Obsolescence is a form of depreciation, right? That's really what obsolescence is in the appraisal world. So let's talk about an obsolescence. Let me give you an idea. If you're an appraiser, there's functional obsolescence that the appraiser should look at. And when I say appraiser, I don't only mean an assessor appraiser, a fee appraiser that's doing it for a bank or for a refinance or something like that. They look at obsolescence. So let's look at one example of an obsolescence. This kind of stands out in my mind from over the years of classes on appraisal, but functional obsolescence. Let's say to get to your kitchen in your house, you had to walk through a bathroom. That's going to be functional obsolescence. It's not going to be a very marketable property. So that's an obsolescence and an accelerated piece of depreciation. We don't have an obsolescence report to answer your question directly. Can we pull those numbers statewide? Absolutely. We can pull any obsolescence that's been added. Now you have curable and incurable obsolescence. So let's say you own a home and the city decides to build a landfill next to you. That's incurable obsolescence. You can't afford to move that landfill to cure the obsolescence of that landfill being right next to your home. So that's incurable or economic or environmental obsolescence. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question, Representative Lynn, but I can sure pull a report of any obsolescence that's been added across the state.
I would definitely like that report. I'd also like to know, how does the assessor fit into this determining obsolescence?
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. They're trained certified appraisers and they need to look at that. They're going to look at things like a cost to cure or something like that. Super adequacy is another form of obsolescence. You're in a subdivision that was all built in 1910 and all of the houses are 528 square feet. This is a real life example, by the way. All the houses are 528 square feet and someone comes in and builds a brand new 10,000 square foot house in that neighborhood. It's going to be super adequacy in that area. And an appraiser is going to have to look at that. And assessors are trained appraisers and certified through the state of Wyoming. They go through a education process on a yearly basis. They have to have continuing education programs as they go along, and so do their staff, as long as their staff is making any kind of valuation judgment.
And if I think I heard you right, you said you could get us the total number of what the obsolescence, the old word,
Yeah.
what the total of that is?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I can get you a dollar total. I'm trying to think of the CAMA system right now. It's usually a percentage obsolescence that's been applied to something for some reason. Yeah,
Go ahead, Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A follow-up to that would be, how about your pollution control exemptions? Could you provide me a total cost for those?
Absolutely. Oh, sorry, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely. In fact, those can be found on the State Board of Equalization's abstract report that they put out yearly. So those numbers are readily available on the State Board's website. But yes, we can pull those too, but they are readily available. And of course, like we mentioned earlier, they'll be having their abstract hearings from June 16th through the 27th. And shortly thereafter, they usually get them posted online.
I'm assuming, which isn't always good, that the fire control exemptions are in the same place or ballpark.
Mr. Chairman, they are. They're reported to the State Board of Equalization on a yearly basis. That is typically your company's. Well, for instance, I used to be the Laramie County assessor. We had a refinery in Laramie County, and that refinery had pollution control, and they would apply by February 15th yearly to get that exemption. Now, sometimes in pollution control, sometimes, yes, it is controlling a pollution per the statute, but sometimes it's creating a byproduct that's sellable. So maybe that entire pollution control unit, whatever it may be, it may not be 100% exempt. It may only be partially exempt because it's creating a byproduct that is sellable.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hate to go back to obsolescence. I know we've beaten this up, but just to make sure I understood clearly, sorry, I'm the slow one here. I'm a little thick. So, but in terms of obsolescence, it's always something that you'd mentioned there's two types of obsolescence. So I might have you describe that, but it's something that is decreasing the value of the asset. Is there ever a case where obsolescence is in some way applied to the fact that an asset is not 100% in use? So that's the tweak I'm asking on. Is it always a case where there is truly a value impacting thing versus an asset being fully used? And I'm curious about that, because as you go through all this stuff, you see things that I wanted to make sure I was clear on that question.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, great question. Something that is not in service, I think you're saying, because typically on a residential property, so I think you're going outside of residential now for sure. Typically on a residential property, yes, there's going to be something wrong that's going to speed up the depreciation of that property. In an industrial situation, could an appraiser make an adjustment to a piece of equipment that has been removed, has not been destroyed or taken out of the state, still taxable? Could they make an adjustment for it being idle? Yes, that could be some type of obsolescence, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that clarification. And yes, you're right. I should have made that clear. I'm kind of stepping outside the residential space to try to understand that too, because I would like that report to be broad enough to cover obsolescence on a broader level. If we could do that, that would be very helpful for us. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond to that. I don't know if we're going to get down to the asset level, the actual widget level. It may be more at an account level. I'd have to look. Some counties, a lot of counties hire outside firms to appraise these complex industrial complexes, if you will, a refinery. Pretty complex for myself or any staff. I would have to have a very high paid engineer on staff to appraise that property. So many times these counties will hire a firm to do that. Will I have that detail at that asset level? Probably not.
Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know where I'm going to go with this, Mr. Gill. The skid mounted structures. Explain how they are taxed.
Mhm.
Because we pay property tax on them. And I've got constituents that are, we had this conversation this morning, so I want that explained so everybody understands it. So,
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, good question. That directive came from the Department of Revenue back in 2001, I believe it was. I don't remember the exact date, but 2001. If it's pertinent to the property, it's taxable as property tax. So that's basically what that memo is saying. If it's on the property and intended to be used on that property and stay on that property, it's a taxable event. Now, most of the time, a skid mounted structure will be something like a 10 by 12 shed with a value of, I don't know, $1,300 times the level of assessment, 9.5% times the mill levy. You're probably looking at $4, $5, $6 in taxes a year on that structure. So very minimal part of a residential appraisal. The main part would be the house and the associated land.
What about meat grinders? Representative Wharf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is the process for like abandoned buildings? Are they still assessed a tax if they've been abandoned?
Mr. Chairman, great question. Representative, yes, they are. They're taxable. Everything is taxable in Wyoming unless specifically exempted by law in 3911-105. So yes, it is. Now, is that appraiser going to appraise it as if it were livable or habitable? Probably not. But yes, it is still taxable.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess one of the questions I have is we've got a state hospital in my county that we just built a brand new state hospital. We got an old hospital that needs to be torn down. And I guess my question is, should the state be paying the county assess taxes on those vacant buildings because they're no longer used for a government purpose and they're not being torn down? And I guess that's one of the things that I'm kind of wrestling with. You know, I felt like we already went to court over a state section that the court ruled in our favor. And then unfortunately, I think some of my friends in the legislature kind of stabbed my county in the back and tried to take that away from us. But I guess I'm looking at this, should in fact the state be paying for those buildings that have been abandoned, that are in need to be torn down? They're kind of in limbo, but should the county be able to assess taxes from the state on that because they're no longer being used for government purpose?
Mr. Chairman, it's going to be a great interim topic, right? I mean, honestly, we've been down this road before on governmental exemptions. Obviously, the land right now cannot be taxed, right, until January 1, 2027, I believe. Should the buildings, are they being used for a governmental purpose? That truly has never been truly defined, right? Governmental purpose. But if you remember, well, I don't remember, but back in 1955, when the Constitution changed and added that when used for a governmental purpose, the voters voted for that. If you remember, I did a lot of research in that time period, and in that time period, the state of Wyoming was still levying 4 mills. Okay, so, and that question came up earlier. When was the last time the state of Wyoming levied a mill on property tax? 1969. What also happened in 1969? Severance tax. So the state of Wyoming has not levied a mill on property tax since 1969. So it brings to question, at that time period, they were trying to expand the tax base and they didn't want government competing with private business. And I think that was the argument at that time. At that time, the news articles were about getting rid of 14 exemptions. And I believe they succeeded in all 14 from the articles I've read. Very interesting. One of them happened to be the veterans exemption. But instead of just cutting the veterans exemption at that time, they eased it out and they made it an $800 lifetime benefit tax dollar. Well, in 2007, I think it was 2007, that changed. that changed to, no, that $800 is gone. We're going to give them a $3,000 assessed value exemption for life, as long as they live or their surviving spouse. So, and then recently, obviously, we changed that from 3,000 to 6,000. So, and that benefit continues to go on. Should they be taxed is your question. I mean, I don't know the exact situation, but if they're not being used for a governmental purpose, I think the law was quite clear that the improvements not being used for a governmental purpose, whether it be the truck stop canopy or an abandoned hospital, I think the law is quite clear that maybe it could be taxed. I'm not a lawyer for sure, but I've litigated quite a few cases, so.
Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. Take an example, but this be an example of obsolescence. I just wanted to be able to say it once in this hearing. So, for example, if you have a housing development that found itself in a Superfund site, and being from Casper, they've had that happen before. So would that be a permanent, when you talked about percentage, lowering their percentage of that whole subdivision? Would you think that would, I would think that would last almost in perpetuity? Because it's not that, even though it may be cleared up by now, it still resides in that same area. And so would that be a proper example would that be applied as a tax or as a percentage of that assessment, do you think?
Mr. Chairman, excellent question. It could be. I mean, it very well could be. It's something that the appraiser will need to consider. And how is appraiser going to consider that? How do appraisers appraise property? They look at sales, right? So if you have properties that sell in that area and they're not selling any lower than anything else, maybe nothing has to be adjusted. I mean, we don't just adjust to adjust. We have to look at sales facts that show an appraiser that an adjustment needs to be made here because of the Superfund site in your example. So I think it really bases it on whether or not the sales and the data speak to whether an adjustment needs to be made.
Follow up. So for example, you guys, if you're in Cheyenne, and I don't know how many housing areas are right near the refineries, probably more than a few, just like there are in Casper. So even when an area gets cleaned up, there's always an inherent risk, a little bit, slight, that it could impact those homes. And buyers may not be aware. They might see it right there, but they have no idea. So I'm just curious about how, if that would be considered by people who are in the know, like assessors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Chairman, great comment. And obviously, I was the Laramie County assessor and appraised those properties. I think the sales, did I go out and make an adjustment just because? No. I think the sales showed me where an adjustment needed to be done. And we'll get into this more tomorrow, not to get in the weeds here, but when an assessor is appraising property, he's going to come up with a replacement cost new, less depreciation, and then he's going to adjust that area for sales that happened. So maybe that adjustment's not as high, but he's going to stay in statistical compliance with the state board and the department in order to value those properties.
Once again, trying to wrap my head around this. That doesn't seem like a situation of obsolescence. That seems like fair market value.
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly right. It is fair market value at that point. And in that case, I was not adding obsolescence to those homes. I just was following the sales because the sales will show you what those properties are selling for.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to go back to the list of exemptions that you might have in CAMA system. Is there a standard or is it a case by case for every assessor when it comes to your obsolescence reports?
So, Mr. Chairman, two things that you said there, exemptions and obsolescence, two two totally different things. So maybe clarify the exemptions. A property owner has to apply for the exemptions. So let's say I'm a fraternal group that you'll find in 3911-105, recognized by the University of Wyoming. I'm a fraternal group. I would apply for that property tax exemption to the county assessor. And then the county assessor would either grant that exemption or not grant that exemption. And of course, that is an appealable decision.
Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
Excuse me, let me label it a different way. Not an exemption per se, but is there a recommended list for the assessors, or is it a case by case that they use to be able to say, this is not currently being used, it's idle? Or is it, this is the way the law is written and we follow it to a T?
Mr. Chairman, great restatement of that question. So on obsolescence, it's going to be a case by case basis. It will be a case by case basis as the appraiser has to make those decisions based on something. And typically, it's not going to be just going out, well, that needs obsolescence. It's typically going to be a conversation with that property owner.
Are we out of questions?
Everybody else is.
Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of the charts, I don't know if you went over it, I missed it. I do apologize, but you do have there's another slide in here that kind of goes year by year. Right?
Mr. Chairman, that's a future on the agenda today.
Oh, there you go. Well, then I need to be quiet and wait. Okay, thank you. Patience is not my birthday.
Let's keep rolling. Okay, open it up for public testimony.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Co-Chairman Committee. My name is Dan Thomas. I serve as a Crook County Assessor. I am here today on behalf of the Wyoming County Assessors Association. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for your continued service and leadership on behalf of the people of Wyoming. We would like to address a growing concern from recent implementations of several property tax exemptions, including the 4% cap on single-family residential structure and its associated land, the 25% homeowners exemption, and the 50% long-term homeowners exemption. While each of these measures provides meaningful tax relief, taken together, they have introduced a significant level of confusion for taxpayers. First, lack of transparency. A key challenge is the lack of clarity in how these exemptions are presented on the notice of valuation. In order to understand changes on their tax liability, a taxpayer would need to compare multiple years of assessments to interpret the ever-evolving structure of exemptions. The Department of Revenue continues to provide a well-designed template and clear assessment process. However, explaining how these exemptions apply to an individual property requires extensive explanation, sometimes multiple pages. This complexity is only growing as additional policies are layered on. Our concern is that future efforts to simplify may unintentionally introduce more complexity. Therefore, rather than simply raising concerns, we would like to offer practical short-term improvement by enhancing the notice of valuation. A clearer and more explanatory notice would go a long way toward improving transparency and reducing taxpayer confusion. Earlier today, to illustrate some of the confusion that taxpayers have, I laid a breakdown on each one of your spots on your desk there. It's titled Taxpayer Scenario. It's very similar to the scenario that Mr. Kilty with the LSO described of a homeowner valuation and all of the exemptions. So this taxpayer scenario itself shows the calculation of property tax estimate involving a taxpayer who qualifies for the long-term homeowners exemption, the 4% cap, and the veterans exemption. Our second concern, communication and public understanding. This confusion also places a burden on the public. Taxpayers often struggle to determine which exemptions they qualify for, when and how to apply, and which forms are required. As a result, we see misapplications, missed deadlines, and a rising frustration, both from taxpayers and from the county offices working hard to assist them. To address this, we as assessors are committed to improving how we communicate these complexities. We understand the need for clear explanations, better outreach, and improved materials, and we're actively working in that direction. And finally, a role in developing sustainable solutions. Looking forward, we respectively request that Assessors Association be included in discussions about future changes, whether they involve property tax reform, adjustments to exemptions programs, or even shifts towards other revenue options like sales tax. We are not here to preserve any specific system. Our role is to help ensure that whatever system the legislature chooses stays aligned with the core principles of a sound tax structure. That being fairness, simplicity, transparency, administrative efficiency, and public trust. As described in long-established tax administration standards, an effective tax system should be proportional, legally sanctioned, convenient, cost-effective, publicly accepted, and transparent. We believe assessors are well-positioned to act as watchdogs for these qualities and help guide the state towards workable long-term solutions. In conclusion, we appreciate the legislature's efforts to provide relief to Wyoming residents. At the same time, we urge you to view the Assessors Association not only as implementers, but as partners, offering local insight and operational experience to help shape effective, sustainable policy. We are committed to working collaboratively to simplify, clarify, and strengthen the property tax system for all Wyomingites. Thank you again for your attention, and I'm happy to stand for any questions.
I think what I heard, and I've worked with some people in my county here, the notice of assessment is a Gordian knot. It's not clear on the bottom what the exemptions are or how that works. So I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. So, partner, help me design a new form and work with Department of Revenue. Instead of residential, get out your decoder ring to figure out which each line is. So I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And we welcome you guys to our committee meetings all the time. We don't do anything separately. We would get in big trouble. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Storr.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you to the assessors and their staff across the state for all the hard work that I know went into trying to be ready for the Board of Equalization in trying to come up with these assessments. I know certainly in my county, our assessors had to do these, many of the calculations by hand. And it is confusing. I'm not sure that putting all the numbers on the form is actually going to resolve the confusion necessarily. Because frankly, there's some higher math involved, especially when it comes to the 4% cap. As it gets compounded, as we heard earlier this today, that is fairly complex. So I do think it's important for this committee to understand that we've created this confusion at the legislative level. And we should really consider thinking about some other ways we might want to go about providing tax relief. Thank you.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming today. My question is, when your constituents come into the assessor's office, what are their number one complaints about understanding it? Is it that we call a building an improvement? Is it the numbers themselves? Is it what exactly are they looking for clarity on?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean. Number one concern generally is how do we derive valuation? Generally in the appeal period itself. But as far as what I was addressing in my speech was the concerns from the additional exemptions and new property tax structure today.
Representative Wharf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question. Can you provide a little bit of comment, feedback on the canvassing requirement that's required? My understanding is that you got to canvass 25% of the county every 6 years. Is that correct in my understanding?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Wharf. Great question. Actually, by statute, we have 4 to 6 years to physically review every property within our counties.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow up. So I guess the question I have is it, in your opinion, is that putting too much of a demand on the county to do that, to get 25% every 4 to 6 years? Because in order to cover it in 4 years, to cover 100%, you got to do 25% every year. And is that necessary, or could you canvass perhaps less and still have the same value of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Wharf. Again, I can't speak to all counties on this question here, but I can speak to Crook County. Right now, we are on track for we're in between 5 and 6 years on our rotation for reviewing the whole county. So for Crook County, it's not an issue.
Do we have anybody online?
Not for this topic, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other public testimony? I guess we'll close public testimony. Oh.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Ed Wagner, Weston County Commissioner. I was just going to touch some numbers as of last week where our assessor had for us on what these tax breaks we're going to hurt our county. Currently, as of last Friday, we were going to lose $220,000 off of our assessed value on our mills that we collect. We assessed the total 12 mills. We're going to lose 220,000, which that doesn't seem like a lot to some counties, but we don't have 220,000 in our budget to cut. We run, I've been a commissioner, this is my ninth year now. We run right at a $20 million budget consistently. Unless there's a big project, it's not our money to spend. If we have a grant, it has to show on our budget, but it's not our money to spend. That's really going to hurt. It's the 220,000 is really hurting us. And then on the other side of that, our special districts are going to lose 338,000. A lot of those entities have no way of generating revenue, and they've been working on a bare bones budget too. Some of our special districts have, like our waste district, we have the opportunity to raise revenue. So we're helped out there. Our schools, that's not included in what we're losing. They're quite a bit more than that. One of our problems is we are 70% privately owned, but of that 70%, the majority of it is all ag land. And our ag community pays 4.2% of our property tax, what they contribute to us. So these cuts are really hurting us. We don't know where we're going to go. We're in our budget. We're struggling right now with what services we can maintain or where we're going to have to start cutting. So I just, in future, legislation, think of these things. Every county is different, how it affects us. We have basically a $4 million reserve. That's all we have. And we've been trying to scrape along and put a little into that every year. It just hasn't happened because, everything, the price of everything is going up and our revenue is not coming up. So we are struggling. With that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you for coming in and testifying. As you'll see later this afternoon or tomorrow, we're looking at some different reforms coming up.
Yes.
Right now, the constitutionality of everything, the fair, equitable, civil, transparent, decorum fitting stuff, it has to be kind of the same across the board. But we are looking into doing some other stuff. The goal initially was just to get some relief out there for everybody and give us a little time to do some reform. So hopefully we get it a little better this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's impacting us immediately. It's where it's coming from us, and our constituents are appreciative of their breaks on their taxes, but we need on the ballot needs to be what services you want to start dropping in our state or in our situation. So.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming today. I want you to know that in the House, we really fought for backfill, and I just would like to know if we were able to be successful and we were able to backfill that, what would that have meant for your county?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, if they had all been backfilled, we could have stayed on track where we were. We're not putting money back for future things yet. Don't have a built up reserve, but at least we wouldn't have to cut things. We could maintain. I bailed out of our commissioner meeting at noon. We had our road and bridge supervisor get an engineer's estimate on fixing the road. We need to rebuild 10 miles of road. 800 to 900 million a mile to rebuild the road is where the engineer's estimate was. We don't have that. So we have to maintain 650 miles of road in our county. So just thank you for the question.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question for you. One of the things when we tried to run the numbers, I think I had trouble getting solid numbers out of Weston County, just pulling them off your main documentation. So it's not my county, but I was trying to look at that. So question for you. So Your, can you kind of give me a good feel for, I'm just trying to get a feel for taking a look at the numbers because I'm looking at 200,000. What's your current general fund number? I have a number in here that shows about 8.1 million. I don't know if that's accurate. That's me trying to pull it from reports. Is that true? And my second question is, what does that general fund look like for, say, the last 4 or 5 years? Can you give me any feel for that? I just like to be able to take an honest assessment looking at these numbers.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chair, the number you see in there, that shows our county reserve fund money in there, which we cannot touch. That has to go strictly for the county roads. We've been building that up. We've got some big projects come up. That's setting it probably right at 3 million is where it is. Our general fund's been staying right where it has. We haven't been able to grow it over the last since I've been a commissioner.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is that 8 million accurate or is that off? Is that assuming? Because I couldn't get good numbers. I was just curious.
That number is all, we have 4 million in basically unrestricted general fund money. That's not earmarked for a county road or our fuel tank maintenance fund that we have to keep. So our reserve is right at 4 million.
I just want to clarify, how much did you say you needed to rebuild the roads?
Mr. Chairman, the engineer's estimate was 800 to 900 million. 8 to 900,000 per mile. I might have said, excuse me, but 8 to 900,000 per mile. And we've got 10 mile, one road, we have 10 miles we need to get rebuilt now. And we deal with other counties' oil field traffic coming across us. We get no revenue from them, but yet they use our roads.
And I wasn't picking on you.
No.
I just was going to ask you if the road was gold plated.
That's my mistake. I misquoted that. Excuse me.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner. I'm just kind of curious. I'm looking at this 25% kind of as a test balloon because here in a year, they're going to put up 50% property tax reduction. Have you looked into that? And have you guys done any forecasting on what that would do to your county? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, we haven't done any serious number looking at it. We're still trying to wrap our hands around this year's budget right now, where we're going to be at. Frankly, it scares me if we get that much more taken away from us. If that answered your question, I mean, we haven't got the numbers crunched for next year.
Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Wagner, for being here. I'm referring to Mr. Gill's handout that breaks this down. It looks like you mentioned that the schools were higher than even the county numbers, and just looking at your school number 1 and school number 7 looks to be about $1 million of exemptions, with maybe half of that coming from the homeowner's 25% exemption. So perhaps that would double with the 50%. But I guess my thoughts on this is especially about the 4%. So I was looking at some of the numbers in my county, and because that 4% gets compounded on these expensive properties, we've got like a $20 million home, and it's actually getting about an $8 million exemption. So that's $8 million that's not coming back to the state to actually help school districts like yours to help make up the difference. So I'm just trying to figure out what makes sense about this policy where we're actually cutting school costs kind of on both ends of the stick, and wondering what your thoughts are on how we can make that up. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storer. it's a one size, it's definitely not fitting all on these tax breaks we're seeing right now. Honestly, I don't have an answer for you on that. I wish I did. I don't know, my wife is a cook at the school district, so we watch that closely, and on the school district side there, I don't know where they're gonna make up their difference, where they're gonna lose it. To me, I don't think it's very fair across the state, where some of the breaks in your county, your residents are getting is way different what our, residents will get. We don't have very many $8 million homes in our county, and you don't have many, probably $500,000 homes in your county. So the one size isn't fitting all on this. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but you guys got a tough job in front of you to figure this out.
Yeah. Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner. Did Weston County experience the same inflationary growth in housing as most of Wyoming? Did you have a little bit different experience in that county for the last 5 years?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins. When the COVID hit, we had people from out of state buying houses sight unseen. And that's part of the reason everybody's screaming right now. They paid way too much for a house they shouldn't have bought, is the bottom line. But in comparison across the state, we haven't seen as big a jump, but we have seen substantial jump. Thank you.
Follow up.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, it almost sounds like between my representative here and your area, it's almost like even further complicate the formula by have a prorated tiered assessment value, or I should say rebate value, is almost something that might have had to be imagined and even further complicate the process. And then I suppose people would think that would be unfair too, I'm sure. But anyway, that's the types of ideas that people were having to come up with, because everyone running for office was finding these exact things, telling you. Probably you heard some of that too as well. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Commissioner and Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I had misspoken. We do have one online public comment when you get a chance for that.
I think we're ready now.
All right, I will let Cindy Barlow in.
Thank you all.
All right, she should be able to speak now.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome to Revenue.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chairman, my name is Cindy Barlow. I am testifying today as a private citizen and as a former Johnson County assessor. I am on the road today, so I apologize for not being on video. But I wanted to bring up a couple of items that I feel are really important for the committee to just consider and to look into further. Keep in mind, this is not, everything that we're talking about today is not the assessor's fault, which I know you guys know. They have a very tough job, and they're doing everything they can to abide by the statutes that are put into place by our legislative body. And the assessors have always had the opportunity to have input. If anything, they've had more time than public to be able to testify and really be able to, even at times last year and watching, even taking that position of lobbying. When it comes to transparency, the part that we as citizens, as myself as a citizen, is that the policy itself is not transparent. It's so hard for the general public to understand this assessment process. And even with working with a lot of other people, even legislatively, they struggle with understanding this approach to valuation. When we talk about the notice of value and how it does come out, it's amazing how confusing it really is, even prior to the caps being placed. And that was a big task for our assessors this year to be able to implement. I know our assessor did a great job in explaining it even to me and being able to understand how it's taken place. But when we're talking about exemptions, I signed into the meeting late today, and I don't know if it was discussed, but so often we're talking about property tax, about the residential effect of the caps that are taking place by what was implemented this last year. And rarely do I hear anybody talk about the exemptions that are granted to industry. Industry takes the time to even talk about how residentially this is going to affect them and that they carry the burden of the tax base in Wyoming. However, nobody talks about the fire and the pollution control exemptions that are out there. And in the abstracts that are provided by the State Department of the State Board of Equalization annually, you can see that these numbers have evermore been increasing. So I think it's important as we're talking about exemptions that we get the true numbers of all the exemptions that are in place right now. And, you know, to Mr. Gill's conversation about obsolescence, I'm going to have to push back on that testimony slightly on the side of the fact that it's assessor discretion. This other company that he spoke of, there's only one other company that is used for valuation in the state of Wyoming, and they oftentimes suggest obsolescence. And unless you're in an appeal, you do not really know at all. Matter of fact, very seldom is it disclosed to the assessor what that high level of obsolescence is. And essentially, it's almost like a quiet exemption. I can tell you that in my county, when I was in office, I had audited this company and made sure that they were reporting all of the assets that I was required to be responsible for. And I can tell you that I recovered $5.5 million in tax dollars to my community, literally changed the assessment for the 5 previous years before I was even in office, because big assets were not being assessed. So, and assessor discretion, another one to a neighboring county who I brought the same concerns to, chose not to. So I'm going to push back on that. I believe that it's something that we need to look at and be mindful of. You know, as we look at Amendment A, there was never a constitutional amendment that hurt the people more than Amendment A. This constitutional amendment has the potential to have such an impact on Wyoming that if we're concerned about property taxes now, depending on how Amendment A is ever implemented, and I hope and pray that this body considers that that is not implemented, but it can have dire effects on those that own homes as well as are renting. So please be mindful of Amendment A. I know that there was a strong lobby that spent a ton of money to be able to see that it was implemented, but it's only because they will raise exponential value if implemented the way I think that they're looking at doing. And I'm also going to just talk briefly about Teton County. Teton County, in working with that assessor and knowing how the CAMA system works, has always struggled with getting those properties to fair market value. So there probably could have been even more revenue brought to Teton County in the past if they were able to assess it at the level that that assessor believes it should be at. But because the design factors and everything else in the CAMA system, they were having a very tough time getting there. So it's been years of being, in some ways, under-assessed. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity and time to be able to come in front of you. I stand for any questions and just really believe that what you guys are taking on here is very, very important work, and I thank you for that.
Questions? Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like to comment on the comments about Teton County. I do think that there were a number of properties that were being undervalued, especially in the commercial area several years ago. And the Board of Equalization actually suggested that we get our act together. And I think we have. I think a lot of those valuations have gone up as a result to something that looks closer to market value. And I think our assessor is actually doing quite a good job. At the same time, you still have properties that are worth 20 million that are getting a $8 million tax break, an $8 million tax break just from the 4% cap. So about 30% on average, it seems like, just looking at the numbers that my assessors provided me. I was hoping for some averages, but it turns out that's a little harder to get. Mr. Gill's still working on that, but we can see that as the values of the properties go up, the percentage of value that is exempted because of the 4% cap generally goes up as well.
Can I comment to that?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Storer, I really appreciate your feedback on that. And if it was an $8 million savings, would that not be more than that 4% cap? Or would it be that it was undervalued and therefore you're now seeing with the increase that difference was in fact the 4%?
Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to remind everyone, the 4% is what the property is allowed to go up. So the savings, the exemption is above and beyond that the actual market value goes up. So if it's a $20 million home, and I believe as Mr. Gill said, we're really starting with 2023 values with the 4% cap. So now after 2 years' times, in some cases, those values have gone up. Sometimes that's because of sales. Sometimes that's because of some newer properties in the neighborhood. And this is not across the board, but in many cases, they have gone up about 30%. And that's the exemption value is what that 8 million represents, not the 4%. So that means essentially that house should be assessed at $28 million rather than $20 million. So that's the $8 million value that's being exempted. Obviously, the tax is a different number, but that's what I was trying to make the point of. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, could I respond again?
Yes, ma'am.
It would be great to have an example of that, to be able to see that math. For some reason in my mind that doesn't quite equate, but again, for the sake of your time, I don't want to take up that kind of time, but I think in order to talk those kind of numbers and to be able to see how that is actually playing out, I think that's overinflated. And I think that that's a problem with our testimonies when we try to educate the legislative body as to the effects of what this is. And really my primary focus was not Teton County. I believe Melissa's doing a fabulous job with what she has as tools to be able to work with. I've always appreciated her. It's the fact that we don't look at industry as well, and that we're overlooking a tremendous amount of value that is being exempted and that it needs to be addressed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, ma'am. I'm trying to follow what you're saying, ma'am. Are you talking about like all the manufacturing as far as industrial manufacturing exemptions? You're talking holistically what the effect of those is in the big picture? Am I following that correct, ma'am?
Yes, you are. Ultimately, oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you for the question. Yes, you have certain exemptions that go for oil and gas and mining and other, uranium and all those other things that are out there under the exception that you get to look at a fire and pollution control exemption that's granted annually that they have to apply for. The obsolescence is another, it is an appraisal form, but just as I gave the example earlier about finding assets, and for example, I knew of an asset that was a superstructure, as Mr. Gill had spoke about before, and that they knew building the superstructure was something that was needed for future production. But in the meantime, they wanted the portion not used as an obsolescence. So it'd be probably functional obsolescence and maybe not even functional, but Mr. Gill can clarify that for me. But regardless, it is an obsolescence that reduces the value of the superstructure. If you put that in context to your home, let's say I overbuild my home and I only use 2 rooms. Well, I don't get an obsolescence based off of the fact that I only use 2 rooms. I am taxed on my full market value, which brings me back to the Constitution and what I hear endlessly in these testimonies is that our Wyoming tax structure is based on uniformity and equality. And I would argue that we are not uniform and we are not equal when what is good for the goose should be good for the gander.
Well, thank you for your testimony. And
thank you.
We're going to move on to the next person.
Mr. Chairman, committee, welcome to Campbell County. My name is Scott Clem. I'm a Campbell County Commissioner. By the way, when you see Representative Knapp, make sure you thank him for building this building. He's got his name on his placard somewhere. Ask him how much it costs. I'm sure he's got a story to tell you. Obviously, you're not in a hardship county. In fact, if you look on some of your information, I was looking earlier, we have the highest assessed valuation, I think coming into this next year by a long shot. And so certainly we're not hurting for money. As we're going into our own budget deliberations, there's a good likelihood that we will not again tax the full 12 mills. We're one of 2 counties that does not tax the full 12 mills, Campbell County and Teton County. There are 2 things that I did want to bring to your attention though, and I apologize if this is somewhat repetitive. I came in late. We were in our own meetings. You've heard a lot about, I'm sure, the constitutionality. The one thing that I would like you to consider is the practical effect of some of the inequality that these tax exemptions have created. Constitutionally, counties are permitted to tax up to 12 mills. And of course, there's all sorts of different requirements or stipulations in the Constitution with other taxing districts and whatnot as well. For instance, cities and towns. When you look at the practical cumulative effect of what happened this last session, you all are aware that school districts are backfilled, and while they're not getting as much money from some of these capture counties like Teton, school districts you funded them completely. And in fact, they are being backfilled. They're being backfilled from the LISRA. And they are, what is it, roughly, I forget what it is, 70-some% of property taxes, right? There's 20-some% that's then split between other taxing entities, whether that's counties or cities or other special districts, college districts, so on and so forth. And it's that smaller percentage, that minority percentage of 20-some%, I forget what it is, it's like 27, 28%. That is, that's where the real inequality comes in. If I can kind of put it this way, you know, if we were to just flesh all the numbers out, school districts are getting their full millage. But when you kind of do the math and parse things out, a county that would tax the full 12 mills, they're actually not getting 12 mills worth in the long run. The school district is getting the full mills. But by virtue of the actions of the legislature this last year, it's actually smaller than that. It's 11 point something, whatever percent. And so you do create that inequality. And I don't know if that has been mentioned, if that has been raised. Something that I think should be brought to your attention amidst all the other constitutional issues that you no doubt are aware of. The other thing that I just want to bring up is something, and I'm not speaking on behalf of our assessor, but I know our assessor has brought to our attention some of the issue coming into this next year with the requirement of having the residency requirement. You must be in your home, I think, for 8 months or something like that. And the more practical, logistical end of how do you decide that? What does that look like? And the concern from our assessor's office is, and from the county commissioners, is we might actually have to hire part-time help or another FTE or whatever just to try to tackle that issue. And again, it makes no sense to do that because we're talking about a window of time where this is all going to take place. But it's during that window of time that our assessor's office is going to be overwhelmed. And how do you actually, how do you determine who's been here for 8 months and all the applications that have to come in and so on and so forth. And so a simple fix, whatever you guys decide to do, is just get rid of that requirement. I know our assessor would love to just, what we did this year, let's just continue on and not hassle with the 8-month requirement, as it's more of a headache than anything else. And it's actually going to cost counties more money to try to go through this process that the legislature created. So, thank you for your work. I know what it's like to be on the other side of the dais. And I appreciate all your hard work and the effort that you're putting into this. And so thank you for being here.
Senator Ride.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Clem, for being here. It's good testimony. I've heard that we have 2 counties that don't charge the full mills, Campbell being one of them. Have you tried to, or did the taxpayers turn that down, or why don't you? Just, it seems like an anomaly with these 2 counties. And could you give me a little background on why it is that way? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Ride. Yeah, a great question. It's been that way in Campbell County for over a decade. And it's not anything that I think that was necessarily something that was driven by taxpayers or anything like that. It was just more of the people that we had in office. We didn't actually need to tax the full 12 mills, and so we haven't. You know, and just to kind of to add on to this a little bit more, in Campbell, we don't have a senior center district. We don't have a museum district. I mean, all the districts that are permitted by law, we don't have many of those. In fact, many of those things, we have those things. We have a museum. We have a senior center. But the county pays for all of that. We pay for all of that through our own mills. We have an airport, county operated. That's all paid through our own mills. And so I think it's a testament really to my predecessors, our predecessors here in Campbell County. It testifies to some fiscal responsibility, right? The fact that you're able to fund all of these things and not have these separate tax districts, and you're able to fund out of the county's portion, and the county's portion is still not the full amount. And so by virtue of that, there is some restraint. And I think that just needs to be spoken out loud. I think it needs to be said. And Campbell County is not the only county. We're an anomaly, right? If every county was like Campbell, it'd be great. But that's Weston County was up here. They're not Campbell County. They wish they had Campbell County's money. I'm sure a lot of counties do. But I do want to just put an explanation point behind this, and that our state has been one of fiscal responsibility, and that is seen in many different ways. And I think that just needs to be acknowledged. I think that needs to be said, even in a county like Campbell, where we're not taxing the full 12 mills. There's been discussions. We could do that. We could build our own rainy day fund, and we've talked about that as well. What if Campbell actually started years and years ago, just like the legislature, and we had our own kind of permanent mineral trust fund, right? And where would we be at? We could actually bring that mill levy way down, because we actually might have investment income that we could use too. But we just never done that. Probably not gonna do that. The state's been blessed. Minerals has blessed it. I'm rambling. I'll just end it there. Thank you.
I think at the next moment, we're going to try to take a quick break for 5 or 10 minutes. I'm seeing lots of people here who need to go somewhere, so we'll hurry. All right. Do we have any other testimony? Or did we pick a good place to stop? Come on up, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just had one more thing that was on the agenda that a handout that I did prepare for the committee. It looks like this. Sorry, the print's so small. It's a table with a lot of columns on it. It's residential assessed values from 2019 through estimated 2025. As we spoke before, 2025 is still estimated until the State Board of Equalization certifies those values. So this was pulled on June 2nd. Actually, I apologize. I did not put a date on that. It was pulled on June 2nd, and I really don't have a lot to say about it, Mr. Chairman. It shows the assessed value of residential property now. That's going to be residential land, residential improvements, and residential personal property from 2019 through 2025. And I would stand for any questions if you have any.
Mr. Gill, as I look at this, I just want to make sure I'm reading it right. 2019, we were at 5.8 billion for assessed value. In 2024, we're at 10.1 billion as a state.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Now, keep in mind that is not apples to apples because things were added, things were deleted. So that's not the same number of houses the next year, same number of houses the next year. So it includes that new construction or demolition, also assets that were taken away.
So we've grown a lot in value. Wouldn't that?
Mr. Chairman, in the aggregate, yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Gill, for bringing this. So question for you in this estimate. This estimate, is this the full assessed value, or does this consider the impacts of the bills? So I just want to get a feel for it. It's a clear drop, and I was kind of curious if what it reflects. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, great question, Co-Chairman Locke. The 2025 estimated column is with the exemptions applied. So that's going to include the 4% cap on the land, the 4% cap on the house, the 50% long-term homeowners exemption, and the 25% exemption on the dwelling and the associated land.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that note, would you be able to provide the committee with the 2025 values without the caps? Like prior to the reductions, and then one column prior to reductions and then one column after reductions?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, I will be able to. I will not be able to do that tonight, unfortunately. I don't have access to the CAMA system from here, but absolutely. I think it'd probably be more appropriate once those values are certified by the State Board of Equalization. So probably 1st of July, I absolutely can provide that to the committee.
And I'm sure Campbell County will let you use their system if you need to.
Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, he doesn't have the statewide data. Yeah, I would be able to get Campbell County's data out of there, but not statewide.
That was solely for humor. Go ahead, Mr. Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just real quick, just so I understand the chart completely. So I'm sorry, I always like to make sure I understand, but are the percentages kind of a year to year change? Is that what those are? So that's a change year by year.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. So
Okay.
that percentage that says 2019, that'd be the percentage different from 2018 to 2019.
Perfect.
And the column that says 2020, that'd be the difference between 2019 and 2020.
Thank you.
Follow up, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just, sorry, I'll probably ask, I say just one more, but I might do that twice more. But that being said, this is all property tax. Is that true? Is this all property tax? This isn't just residential, I think this is all property tax, including, is it just residential? Just residential?
Mr. Chairman, this is just residential,
okay.
so this will be
Thank you.
residential improvements, residential land, residential personal property.
I can't read.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Representative Riggins.
I'm just looking at Johnson County with their negative growth. I just curious about that in the 2024 column. 0.80 negative. Am I looking at that right?
Mr. Chairman, yes, Representative, you are looking at that correctly in residential. Now, keeping in mind those 2024 numbers that I have on here were the capped numbers.
Oh,
So it wasn't full fair actual value. It was the cap numbers, keeping in mind that 2024 was the first time that we placed a cap on the 2023 dwelling value.
okay, thank you.
I guess now it's my turn to ask about the spreadsheet. And I'll just use Johnson County. In 2023, they had 24.58% growth or increase in value.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. Again, that's not the same properties compared to the same properties. Always keep that in mind.
Right. It's the aggregate.
Yeah.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hear you say that these aren't the same properties to the same properties. Is there a number within the CAMA system that you could say in 2019, there was 5,000 homes, in 2020, there was 5,280? Something to that effect?
Mr. Chairman, great question. Yes and no. I could probably, and not to get too deep in the weeds, Representative, sorry, but every structure, every piece of land has an abstract code. So let's say 10101 is a single family residential structure. I could give you how many single family residential structures were in this year and in this year. Yes, we could give that number. Is it totally representative? No. That would only be at that account level. So at that account level, that had to be visible or there in 2023, and it also had to be there in 2024. Now, we don't know what changes have happened either, right? So in 2023, this house didn't have a finished basement. In 2024, it has a finished basement. So no, can I track every one of those changes? Absolutely cannot.
Follow, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to request that the department send over numbers to the committee that are the amount of homes, whether they're single family, commercial, residential, the classifications, so that we can see how many are in each classification broken down for the comparative years, 2019 to 2025.
Mr. Chairman, we can absolutely pull that number by the abstract code and give you a count per abstract code. And it'll be interesting when you see that, because we could pull vacant land and maybe you have 10,000 parcels of vacant land that is residential, non-agricultural in one year. And the next year you have 8,000. Well, maybe we built 2,000 houses in that year. Who knows? I mean, it's hard to say, but I think you will see that those numbers kind of jive together as you look at that data, but absolutely we can do that.
Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And when you provide that, please, could you give us a decoder ring so that we know what those classifications are? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I absolutely will provide a decoder ring.
You have anything else?
I don't, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have any public testimony on this?
I did have a question for Mr. Gill.
Go ahead. Representative
Mr.
Starr.
Chairman.
I'm serious. It's hard to see you guys.
I know, I understand that. It just made me think about, so I don't think there's are there any exemptions on vacant land currently? Or at least none of these, I think. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, not that I can think of off the top of my head. I don't believe there is anything in 39-11-105 for vacant land, except for possibly vacant land owned by the state now
Right,
would be one.
right. So if we were to look at, excuse me, Mr. Chairman,
Follow up.
question. If we were to look at the vacant land, we would probably get a better sense of what that market value is, according to the assessors, as compared to what the assessed value is on residential land, right? Because that piece is being exempted. I mean, you'd have to compare apples to apples, obviously. But you would see that actually they would be valued at significantly different, probably at this point in time.
Mr. Chairman, to respond to that, I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but I think I know where you're going. So typically vacant land would not have infrastructure in it, typically, right? So yes, you would see the difference in the infrastructure between an improved parcel, maybe not improved with a house or with a commercial building or with an industrial site. You might see the difference just because of the infrastructure alone. Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman,
Follow up.
just one more. It would seem to me that though because the assessors also assess the value of the land for residential separately from the improvement. But in for residential properties, those are actually being held lower as a result of the exemptions, at least as the 4%. Or even for any of the other exemptions. So what's being assessed, in other words, and what's being taxed would be lower for the residential than it would on the land than it would for the vacant land that's, let's say, next door to it, even though they're very equal otherwise.
Mr. Chairman, I definitely a Teton County question. I mean, absolutely, right? I think you could probably see that. I don't know that for sure. I've never really done that analysis, but with the exemptions applied to the improved land or the associated land versus a vacant parcel next door, you might see that those values flip flop where they typically in the past probably wouldn't have. Maybe not quite yet, but yeah, I could see where that could happen. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So something interesting since Teton County comes up, and that's one of the things I didn't ask earlier. I know we're going to be very curious looking in more detail of the impact of Teton County, but it's kind of interesting. So I'd like you to talk to these two numbers because just looking at Teton County, just looking at it in 2024, and I haven't exactly looked at those numbers, but you can see that the increase from 2019 to 2024 is very significant with that 5.8 million to 10 million. And I haven't really looked at that percentage exactly calculated it. That being said, Teton County, out of that 10 million, it kind of goes back to a number you threw out earlier, which was, it was either you or maybe it was Representative Storr that threw it out, that it impacted them by 35% roughly. I mean, I'm winging at 37%, I think was used, but kind of interesting. Look at the number of the 25 estimate that's still 3.2 billion, right? Sorry, I was using million. 3.2 billion compared to the 8.2 billion of the rest of the state. That's an interesting percent impact that just jumped out at me. I was just curious if that was something you'd taken a look at or something you would take a look at. Because I'm curious with that. That's definitely a different percentage impact when you start looking at the impact of all these things, where they're a significantly higher impact to it. And it's just something that jumped out at me. So.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Locke, great observation there. Keep in mind, most of the homes in that county are over $1 million. Keep in mind the 25% was up to the first 1 million. So over a $3 million home is only going to get a 6 or 7% exemption on that 25%. To Representative Stohr's point earlier, the cap is exempting more value than the 25% now, because the market is so hot still in that area.
Do we have any other public testimony? We will close public testimony. What's your pleasure, committee? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the Senate File 69 that we passed this last year, I would like to propose that LSO drill draft us a bill removing the 8-month requirement to live in the home for that exemption.
Would that include the owner occupied language
It
in
would.
it too?
Yes.
Because I think it's got to go if the 8 months goes. Okay.
Yes.
And moved by Representative Brown, seconded by Representative Lean. Comments? Representative Stohr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, this was on the 25%. Correct. So the Chairman Locke's pointing out that Teton County currently represents about 39% of the total exemptions that we've put in place. As you can see on this handout. And that the 4% cap represents, that does not go on owner occupied. It goes across the board on all residential structures. So and that represents, Teton County represents 53% of the 4% cap, as for the reasons we just discussed. So if you're going to make all homes get the exemption, then you're just giving second homeowners a bigger tax break. It may not be that meaningful because they're already getting such a big tax break. But the idea certainly that came out of previous revenue committees was to focus on folks who own their homes, who live in their homes. And those are the folks that we wanted to help. And that's what the refund program has been designed to do. And it's worth noting, I think, that so there were 5 counties that did a refund program.
No.
Along with the state. Sorry. And 3 of them have decided not to continue the county program because of the tax cuts they've seen to date. And Teton County is still debating that, last I heard. I think only Converse was going to move forward with the county program. So essentially, we're giving tax breaks to people who don't need them as a result of then taking away tax breaks for people who do. So I think this proposal goes in that same direction of going in the wrong direction of helping people that we don't need to help, who may be just helping second homeowners. So I just don't really understand it. Thanks.
Mr. Gill, can you come up here for a minute?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So as this bill's written, in a year, just in my county alone, there'll be 18,900 applications. And if you don't get it done on time, oh, you're just out of luck. I'll leave the other word out, but it seems to me that this could actually end up costing more than the tax break itself. And so I'd kind of like your opinion on that. And maybe the assessor wants to come up and say something too.
So, Mr. Chairman, there'll be 175,000 applications statewide. That's approximately how many homeowners actually occupy their homes. That being said, the department knew this was in the bill, already in law. Keep in mind, the legislature last year did not put any deadline. So that is up to the department to promulgate rules for that. There's no deadline for the application or when the application's open. So that's up to us to promulgate rules in that chapter. We have already propped up a website and no cost except for staff time to the state of Wyoming. We have programmed a website that everyone in the state can go to. They will be able to find their address, click on their house, and tell us that it's owner occupied. It's pretty simple, honestly. We have designed it to be able to be used on a cell phone. We've designed it to be used on a tablet, a computer, a desktop, whatever the case may be. We've designed it for pretty much every electronic device. And my head of my technical service group, David Chapman, who's been there 35 years, him and his group have designed it. So we have it ready and we have it ready to go. Now, are there multiple things that owner occupied is coming up? I mean, I think we know there are. We have owner occupied coming up next year for Senate File 69. The People's Initiative is an owner occupied bill also on the structure only. So we have that. Then we also have Amendment A. If the legislature were so to go down the path of creating that subcategory in the residential class now and creating that owner occupied, we have the website set up. Now, what's the website going to do? We're going to be able to collect that data, and then we can give that data to the county assessor. Obviously, they're going to want to look at it first because, you know, you're out on the web. You don't know what kind of information you're getting. We've done everything we can to make sure that it's not some bot just putting out bad garbage out there. They actually sign it digitally. Okay. It's not fancy, but they sign it with their mouse or their finger or whatever the case may be. And then we will have that in a spreadsheet, and the CAMA system, we are able to download that into the CAMA system. So, and then we will populate something in the CAMA system that says, this house is owner occupied. It gets the 25% from Senate File 69. So we are ready for it, honestly. The plan is, and the assessors are in talk with their own local treasurers, but when the county treasurers send out the tax bills in, typically, I think the deadline is October 10th, but typically treasurers send those out in mid-September, early September. There will be a note with that website on there, and that website will not change. So folks will be able to apply. Now, let's talk about future. So do we want 175,000 people having to go to a website every year? I don't think that was the legislative intent. I really don't. So what we're looking at doing there is we can gather this data on a daily basis as as deeds go through the assessor's office and they change ownership on property. So if you, the co-chairman were to sell his house and he had already signed up for the owner occupied, and then he sells that house the next year, it's going to take that application away and that new owner is going to need to apply. How do we get the advertising out there? I'm not positive, whether that be through the legislative body getting it out there, whether that be other government agencies getting it out there, press releases. I don't know, but we'll be able to keep that owner occupied until it changes hands, get rid of the owner occupied, make the new owner apply for that. So we are ready for it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Go ahead, Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another question on the owner occupied, because this came up earlier in the interpretation of owner occupied. And this is something that it's one of those things where at the legislative level, maybe we didn't fully discuss this. But are we talking about owner occupied at that residence? Or are we talking about people who've lived in the state the proper amount of time? Because this is the tricky issue. Okay, so let's say I sold my house, I bought a new house just down the street, right? And now all of a sudden, I don't qualify. Tricky deal, just wanted to get your feel for that, but I wanted to understand that. Did we address the owner occupied issue properly when we put that out there? And how clear is that to the department? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you did define owner occupied in that bill. And owner occupied meant they lived there. I think it was 8 months or whatever the case may be. Might I suggest some language? Just a thought. I'm looking at the veterans exemption. And in the veterans exemption, the claimant's right to exemption. So this is in 3913-105 C Romanet 4. So it's going down the list here of the claimant's right to the exemption, that during the lifetime the claimant or the claimant spouse owns the property. I'm going to paraphrase. The total tax benefit which the claimant expects to receive under the section to the best of the claimant's knowledge, that the exemption for the real property shall only apply to the principal residence of the veteran or the qualifying spouse. So we give that veterans exemption to the principal resident of that veteran in the statute. Now the rules may have some dates in there. I know, and there are some things in the rules where if a veteran has to go to a home for care, but they're anticipated to come back, they can still qualify for that. There's some different caveats that we've put in there, but maybe something principal residence, to use Senator French's example of his parents who had the Airstream. They didn't want to sign something that we live here in this house 8 months a year, laying our head on the pillow 8 months a year. Get it? So, but are they still residing there even though they're going up to a lake for a couple of weeks and going over here for a couple of weeks? Are they still residing there? I think that's something that's a policy decision for you to decide what is owner occupied, and could you refine that? Could you refine that definition?
Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And kind of based on the fact that I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with the way in that legislation that we defined owner occupied, to be honest with you, because I don't think that our intent was that. Based on that, I probably would at least ask that we do a bill draft. The bill draft has been requested. I would vote for that, but I know it's been moved and seconded, but my comment is I'd probably vote for it because at this point, I don't think we have that properly defined, in my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, if I could comment to that, I apologize. Keep in mind, the budget session doesn't start till what, February 14th or something like that this next year. I don't remember the exact date. By that time, we probably collected the signatures. We've collected the applications.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that we move forward with Representative Brown's draft and that we continue this conversation at our next meeting.
Second that.
So we're gonna just look at a draft next meeting. And that's what we're voting on. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Representative Storer.
I was just saying that I was a no, thank you. Could I see what the vote was? It's hard to see from down here too.
I think it was 13-1.
Case is a
Or
no,
two.
sir. Hale is a no.
And Pappas.
Maybe we could have a roll call.
Works for me.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on Representative Brown's motion to draft a bill. Senator Case,
No.
Senator French,
Aye. Yes.
Senator Ide,
Aye.
Senator Pappas, Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Campbell, Representative Lean,
Aye.
Representative Lucas,
Aye.
Representative Riggins,
Aye.
Representative Storer,
No.
Representative Stivar,
Aye.
Representative Worf, Co-Chairman Locke, Chairman McEwen.
Aye.
11 aye, 3 no, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'd say that's passed. We'll look at that next committee meeting. Anybody have anything else?
Mr. Chair.
Representative Lucas.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we remove the sunset date from the long-term homeowners property tax exemption. Short and sweet, that's it.
It's been moved and seconded that we remove the sunset date on the long-term homeowners. Let's
Mr. Chairman, is there any discussion?
yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with this. You know, myself, I've been paying property taxes for 51 years. Well, a lot of those folks out there that are 65 and older and been paying property tax for 25 years or more, they're the ones, I guess it's a benefit for them, but just think about it. They're the ones that have done the heavy lifting on paying for that fire district in their community, the hospital district, the cemetery district, the weed and pest, on and on and on, the schools, you know, you can go on and on. So, you know, I'm fully in support of this. They've worked hard, and you know, I hate to pull at the heartstrings, but I had a senior citizen come to me I think it was a year ago or so, begging me. The lady was on a fixed income and very small amount of money. Her husband had passed away. She couldn't pay her property taxes with her fixed income, and she was bawling her head off. Now, I'm kind of sometimes appear kind of gruff, but also have a soft heart, believe it or not. You know, that's hard to deal with. So I'm fully in support of this. Thank you.
Question's been called. Roll call. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The ayes have it. Senator Ride.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to bring a motion. I don't want to give you the motion yet until I tell you why I'm going to bring the motion. I've been on this committee 3 years. This is my third year with a lot of others here, listening to a lot of property tax discussion. And it's a system, as the good county assessor said from Cook County, that it needs to shift into something else. I mean, we've got layers upon layers of exemptions. We've got caps, we've got refunds, we've got sunsets, we've got primary residence, we've got minimum 8 months, we've got CAMA systems, we've got business personal property, we've got pollution control, we've got fire control exemptions. I mean, for the common person to understand what their property taxes are, I mean, you have to hire teachers to bring them in there. I was looking at the schedule here. 1876 was the first property tax ad valorem. We were on a gold standard back in 1876, where there was literally no inflation for 50 years. I mean, we were tied, our money was sound. What's going on here right now is we're paying unrealized gains on these increases. I mean, we got a policy of inflation at the national level. I mean, the money supply, the prices going up are just symptoms of that. And we're having to pay that unrealized, that gain. And it's not fair. It's the wrong system. We need to shift to a new system. I don't have all of the answers, but I've got a proposal that I want to make. I want to make a motion to eliminate, repeal Section 15 of the U.S. Constitution entirely. And pardon me? Yeah, the Wyoming Constitution. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what the U.S. Constitution is, but yeah, of the Wyoming Constitution. And I want to direct LSO to do a draft of repealing that section of the Wyoming Constitution, and also look into, and it should be up to the legislature to look at a consumption tax, a sales tax. I mean, it's the only way we're going to muck out all of this layered minutia of property taxes. And it's really the only fair way to go. At least you have a choice on a consumption tax. So I would entertain any discussion on that, but I think that it's a shift that we need to start looking at. I mean, we've got a policy of inflation in Washington, and it's not going to get any better. I mean, CBO numbers, just CBO numbers, whether you believe them or not, those are government numbers, say, our national debt's going to be another $24 trillion in the next 10 years. I mean, we've got to protect our citizens here somehow, and at least they have a choice. They don't have to keep fighting, City Hall at the assessor's office day in and day out. That's what I do. So my motion is, as I mentioned it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Been moved and seconded. Comments?
Mr. Chairman, that's over here. Staff, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarity, would this be just the portions of Article 15 related to property taxes? Because there are provisions in there that are not related to the property tax, prohibited profit making from public funds and things like
Yes.
that.
It would just be property tax related. Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not-
Co-chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure exactly where I stand on this overall from that perspective. It's kind of interesting, but we definitely are experiencing a lot of people said, oh, we've got good rock solid legislation, or excuse me, a rock solid article in our constitution, but clearly we don't, because it is affecting us. And we constantly see this. It's unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional when we try to make a change. So from that perspective, I want to see what this looks like. So that's where my vote's going on this, is in favor of it. Because I do want to see what that looks like. And honestly, I do want it to be less of this constant, it's unconstitutional, and more back to what does the legislature want to do with this taxation? So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Wharf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess as I sat here and listened to the discussion, I mean, one of the things that became very apparent to me is we've been tasked with trying to come up with uniformity and equality in the way we applied this tax. And it seems like to me, we've got two counties here that are both represented. One county is struggling. Their means to generate property tax seems very limited. And we got another county that's sitting here that's saying, and we've had a couple that have said they're so flush with funds, they don't know what to do with it all. And so they're not even taxing at the maximum rate. So I do think it's probably time to look at maybe throwing this out and looking at a different way to tax. And if it is through consumption, that's something that we all do. And I think it's something we all understand. If you buy something, it's going to come with a tax. But I guess that's one reason why I'm leaning towards this. I think it's a novel idea, and I think it's something we need to look at. Because I don't know how we take something that's already unequal and there's no conformity, how we force that round peg into that square hole, because it's not working. And I think it's time that we realize that there's a problem and look at a different way to accomplish that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Case.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I would urge us to be very cautious at this point. And I think we're kind of tangling up different concepts. One thing we're tangling up is the property tax with the distribution of the property tax between counties, and the fact that wealth is different across the state. And the largest driver of that is minerals, and the second largest driver is scenic towns. And so, we talk about, well, let's just get rid of all that. It's not fair to counties. Some have a lot of money, some don't. Let's get rid of it and replace it with a consumption tax. You would still have a distributional problem with a consumption tax. So are you going to take Niobrara County, for example, and say, all right, people, your county is going to be funded by consumption, and it's the consumption that occurs in the county? There's nothing there. There's very little exchange of, so it's naive to think that we can get rid of a property tax that applies. And apparently we want to get rid of it for minerals and for everything else, and replace it with some kind of a consumption tax, which is just an enormous bit of naiveness, I guess. It would be so very difficult to get a consumption tax in place. And then you'd have the same questions about fairness because of the unequal location of where commerce occurs across our state. Property taxes have been a basis of local government taxation for well more than 100 years. They've got their wrinkles, but we actually have done a pretty good job of implementing them. And frankly, Wyoming's taxes aren't that excessive. There's another point in that when you go to consumption taxes are regressive. They hit poor people harder because they spend more of their income. That poor lady that Senator French was talking about, who must spend everything she has she'll be most harmed by a consumption tax. So, don't have a bill draft yet. Don't get the cart in front of the horse. If you want to study it more, think about the concepts of what a consumption tax would look like that would replace property taxes in Wyoming. Think what that means. And what it would mean for minerals and what it would mean for industrial property. So, don't just throw a bill draft out there where we're going to be put on the line and then we'll get another 1,000 emails that say vote to get rid of the property tax when it's not being thoughtful. And that's what I would urge us not to do. Let's figure out what this means before we get a bill draft out there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Case. Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just thought I'd make reference back to Mr. Quilty's color-coded tax rate and collections that we looked at earlier this morning as a reminder. And along the same lines of Senator Case's comments, we're talking about $2 billion a year that we're going to try to make up the difference. We're only collecting about $1.4 billion in sales and use tax currently. So with the system we have, 4% statewide and the local option. So if you just do some quick math there, that means we'd at least probably be doubling our sales tax. And it's also important, I think, to note that property tax is consistent. Granted, we've seen these increases of late, but overall, it doesn't have the same volatility that sales tax does with our economy. And for that reason, it's a lot more stable. It's something that counties can count on. And I don't see how we would make up the difference. And I just don't think that's really the direction we need to be going. Once again, thank you.
Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll vote in favor of this measure, but I'm also not a property tax repealer. I do want a property tax formula that combats wild market trends up and down as we've been experiencing, and who knows how long that'll continue. You'd think at some point they're not going to borrow you enough money eventually to buy some of these places. So I'd support the measure, but almost in a path to find a way to get a more even-handed, even formula for assessing property, and something that you won't have to worry about radical downturns because we have refunds in the future. You have a consistent, you know what's coming ahead each year after year. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just finish up here. We can say that it's naive. We can make excuses all day long. I mean, that's what, politicians do a lot. They always kick the can down the road. And this proposal, this resolution is just a good start, I think, to open up the conversation, study what it's going to take to, what sales tax increases we may need to replace what we have in property taxes. So, I'm not afraid to look at something new. What we're doing over and over again doesn't seem to be working real well in my eyes and most of my constituents' eyes. They can't understand, the 4%. How do you do the calculation? You got to go back, another year, and then you got 25%, and then you got 8 years on top of that, or 8 months that you have to be there. I mean, it's getting so onerous that the common person can't understand, how his value is and how he gets exemptions. So I think it's a real good start to look at it, and it's a fair tax. I mean, I think a property tax is probably the most immoral tax. You can't get away from it. You know, talks about it being regressive. Let's look at that. Let's look to see if it is. I mean, if they're not getting chased out of their house with their property taxes going up, let's see what the lower end of the spectrum looks like there. So I think it's a good start. It'll bring up the conversation and we can go from there. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I want to make a comment too. We've kind of gone down the rabbit hole on this. This doesn't get rid of property tax. It puts the onus back on the legislature. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get rid of property tax and come up with 6% sales tax. It's just a way to examine this for some true reform. So I'm going to support it at least till I see the first draft. Thank you. Representative
Mr.
Storer.
Chairman?
I just wanted to have I just wanted to have the question repeated because I thought that was what the motion was and see what Senator Case.
Sorry,
Senator
Mr.
Case.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard the motion to be that we would pull out property taxes from the Constitution. And that's the basis of putting them forward. So in my mind, it gets rid of property taxes. I think it's problematic when we are mad kind of at how complicated it's gotten in the past 2 years with all the different bills and different approaches to granting tax relief of caps and living in your house for 25 years and being a certain age and then across the board and the number of months. But we have done all that ourselves in the past 2 years by ramming forward policies that aren't that well thought out in the big picture of things. And so we've got complicated things on the book that we created and people in this room created, and we're mad about that. And that's what happens when you throw bills out there and vote on bills and get the public behind them and then get them out and passed without really thinking of the ramifications. We need to study the topic first before we throw a resolution out to eliminate property taxes from the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Case. Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Case. You know, your comments are well taken. You know, I think that we've been given property tax relief. I'm looking at property tax reform. You know, we were doing what the people directed us to in the legislature to do something with property taxes. And we've helped a lot of people out, I think, with the legislation that we brought forward. And we need to look at some real reform at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are we ready for the question? All those in favor?
A roll call, please.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on Senator Ide's motion. Senator Case,
No.
Senator French,
Yes.
Senator Ide,
Aye.
Senator Pappas,
Oh.
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Campbell, Representative Lean,
Aye.
Representative Lucas,
Aye.
Representative Riggins,
Aye.
Representative Storer, Representative Stivar,
Aye.
Representative Wharf,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Locke, Chairman McEwen.
Aye.
11 aye, 3 no, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody have anything else?
Tomorrow, 9:30.
Eve, can we start at 8:30 tomorrow? Or do we have to do 9:30 because it's been put out?
Mr. Chairman, I believe we can start at 8:30 if you would like, and we can send out that meeting notice update.
Mr. Chairman,
Let's do that, so we're not keeping everybody here.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator Case?
I can't remember what's on the agenda for tomorrow, but if people have planned on us starting at 9:30. I'm sorry about the echo, but how can we start at 8:30 and deny public participation potentially?
No, I think we just need the extra.
Let's go ahead and start at 9:30. And with that, we'll adjourn.